Namaskar, welcome to Asiatic Dialogue. We are again back with a new episode, and this is an episode which is going to be of an arousing interest to all of us. And this is on the history of Indian temples, its evolution and typology. And we know that in India, we are in fact totally surrounded by temples, with lot of repository of temples all around India, with various makes and styles covering the length and breadth of the country, with various philosophies and with that of the theogony of gods, and also worship and worship patterns along with that of the society and the rituals which are associated. And in this session, we are with Dr. Rajendra Yadav, who is the superintending archaeologist of Kolkata Circle Archaeological Survey of India, and he is a profound scholar who has a very high scholastic achievement, and he is world renowned for his studies on temple, and that too also on the Buddhist archaeology and that of the Buddhist archaeological sites in India. Now, welcome you to this particular show, sir.
Namaskar.
Welcome. Namaskar. And first of all, I would like to express my sincere thanks for coming down to this show, and would like to have your guidance on, in fact, on this particular aspect and the parleys which are going to have relating to that of the temple and the temple structure and also the evolution. Now, in India, in fact, we are totally with that of temples, right? In fact, it is very much part and parcel of our culture. There are huge repository of temples in India across the length and breadth of various practices and rituals related to worship of various gods and goddesses. Now, how did the study first came up, and who are the pioneers behind it? Sir, if you can highlight on that.
Thank you very much. If you think who has first started the temple studies in India, this question is really difficult to say, because temple is very much imbibed in our society and our culture. So temple was practiced right from the early centuries of the Christian era, but it was codified in due course of time. Around 4th century or 5th century, it was started to codify. And after 16 or 1500 years, it was written by our various scholars, our gurus, sthapatis, and these canonicals, these treaties were various in very different languages: Sanskrit, Odia, Tamil, and regional languages as well as you can say Odishan as well as the Gujarati. Mm-hmm. But when we came into the modern context, our temple studies was started by the Orientalist, but it is a wrong notion. If we examine the papers or the works of the scholars, you will get I can mention Mr. Ramraj. Mm-hmm. Ramraj was the first person. He's a Tamil person. He born in a Tanjore district in a very poor family in 1790, and he started first time to decodify our Vastu Shastras, especially Mansara, because these our ancient treaties or temple treaties are written in Sanskrit and Tamil, but it was not known for the public, common man. Because the Ramraj was very much familiar with the English, they are well versed in the English, he is working in the British office, defense audit. So he is having good knowledge of Sanskrit as well as the English and Tamil. Mm-hmm. So all three languages was very, very, very good to decipher that book, and it was trying to translate into the verses into the drawings. Mm-hmm. So his work, he has started gradually, he come across with the facts, and he prepared the 43 illustrations of Mansara. That 43 illustrations was first banner work because we lost this kind of this science of architecture in modern sense. But when he translated the verses, Tamil verses into the drawing, so he did excellent job he tried to contact with the local artisans. He visited various temples and tried to understand the meaning. And finally, he published one book. That is Essay on the Architecture of Hindus. Actually, he passed away in 1830. But after his demise, his wife has published, because his wife of European, she's a British lady. So she has published in 1834 from London. So that after publication of that book, the people came to know the ancient treasure of the temple architecture, how our canonical or Vastu treatises are so elaborate and so valuable informations are in the text. So that was the ice breaking, and after that, lot of Orientalist or especially European scholars have attracted to know more and more about these temples.
Now, this is the book what Sir was talking about. This is the book is titled "The Essay on the Architecture of the Hindus" by Ram Raj. If anybody would like to access this book, they can access it from Amazon, and it is published by both Aryan as well as by GAN. So, if anybody would like to access, you can access it from Amazon. Now, this is a wonderful prestige. In fact, I was just going through it, and I was, totally, in fact, lost to this particular the arena of the geometry and that of the structure, the architecture. Now, related to it is that of the basic of the science, which is related to that of the Manasara or the entire Manasara text. Sir, if you can, highlight what actually Manasara is and how, in fact, it has given the base of that of the temple studies and the temple structure formation.
So far as the India is concerned, I'm just talking about in my words, India have the diverse culture, and because India has a north and south, we have two distinct culture, and these culture have very contrasting in nature, because Narmada beyond, we call the South India or Peninsular India. So Peninsular India was evolved in a different way, because they have their own rustic style and culture and very much indigenous in nature. Whereas the North India is concerned, we have very good contact with the northwest frontiers through the land routes. So our culture was very much volatile and intermingled with the outer forces. So as to the temple architecture studies is concerned, our earliest treaties, like one of the South India, the Mansar and Maimat and Kamikagam, these are the South Indian texts. And Mansar is one of the earliest canonical treaty in Tamil that was covering the entire concept of South Indian temple, Dravidian style. We call it Dravidian style. But as so far the North Indian is concerned, the Mansara also giving the name of the Dravida Vesara and Nagara. The Nagara is known for North India. Above North India, above Narmada, beyond, that is the region known as the Aryavart.
Or the ridge.
Ridge, that is the ridge. Narmada is a dividing line. Broadly, the India was divided into first north and south. So southern peninsula have different culture and northern India have different culture, but we are sharing the common cultural trait, that is our religious beliefs, our philosophy, our culture is almost same. But the only that our practices are little bit different according to our geographical locations. Because the same philosophy, maybe the nomenclature will change. Because the gods, like a Shiva is here, but Dakshinamurti become very popular in South India. Kartikeya is also common in North India or South India, but South India, Kartikeya known as a Subramaniam. So now the nomenclature will change. We are coming on the Mansara. So Mansara is one of the canonical, was the earliest canonical treatise which describe the entire philosophy of the temple, and right from the selection of the land and construction of and Kumbhavikesham. Kumbhavikesham means the coronation, the last coronation and the Pran Pratishtha, because in the Pran Pratishtha ceremony was right from the early to all the commissioning of the temple. Entire process was described in these treatises. So Mansara is one of them, like Apraja Priksha in the North India, Samrangana Sutradhar in the North India, which was Samrangana Sutradhar, you can say, compiled by King Bhoj, Parmara King Bhoj. It was that was the treaty when Parmara King Bhoj was compiling. He was started and learned like artisan. So after experiencing the practices, and he wrote this compilation, and he clearly mentioned in the opening verses how we have just collected the information of all the previous books, like Aprajati Praksha is one of the earliest North Indian treaties. So the knowledge which were already compiled in our treaties or Vastu Shastras, so that he taken, and now new thing have added in his book, like a Samarangana Sutra.
That's great. In fact, when I was going through the literature, the most important literature which actually we study, that is actually the Manasara, and that is the architecture of Manasara and the Manasara of the architecture by Prasanna Acharya, right? And if you can, just talk about how his contribution was to that of the temple studies.
Because after Ramraj, I think many of the European art scholars have continued this practice, because I should mention James Prinsep, the contribution of the James Prinsep, who is the coin examiner. He was appointed in the Banaras, and he published the illustrated Banaras, and he prepared the sketches and documented all the temple and ghats. And after Prinsep, when he came to Calcutta and start decipher the Brahmi script, and he published many articles and closely associated with the Asiatic Society, where we are sitting here. So this is the one of the major contribution and kind of source of inspiration. So James Prinsep was inspired the many new officials of the British Army who came to India and serving in the army and in different positions. So if you say many of them, like Cunningham, the Ferguson was the next person who's very much influenced from James Prinsep, and he started to document the temples and rock cut caves of India. So Ferguson's contribution cannot be forget, and his documentation was amazing, because he emphasized much more on the pictorial documentation especially. So at the time he has collected 3,000 photographs, and he traveled across the country, especially the western part and the central part of the country, and collected 3,000 photos in his archives, and published many more books, especially on the Indian architecture. In 1845, he published first book, and second was an historical inquiry into the true principles of beauty in art. So it was published from London. These collections, these books have inspired many more Europeans, because they have read these books, and they find out that they know what are kind of treasures we have in India. So these early publications, like Ramraj have published about the Mansara, then Ferguson have published, and James Prinsep have deciphered this Brahmi. So this kind of new publications or new informations coming from the Indic countries, especially from India, and the Western world was very much attracted towards this hidden knowledge. So after Ferguson, he continued his studies or focus on the rock cut architecture. So the rock cut temples of India he published in 1964. So that was one of the another contribution by him, and the biggest contribution during his regime, that was the formation of commission, that is the Bombay Architectural Commission. So that architectural commission was formed by the local the governor of Bombay, Bertel was the person who have behind this idea. So this commission have contributed many publications, and they have published new books, especially focused on Ahmedabad, Berar, and Mysore area. So these publications have covered the maximum rock cut architecture of the Western India.
Now, in fact, you have raised a very interesting topic, wherein actually the ignition of the studies which was initiated by Ramraj, and that took a lot of people their interests and in fact their likings into this. You mentioned about James Ferguson, you mentioned about Prinsep, you mentioned about Varghese. Now, coming down to one of the most important tragedies, what happened is another Bombay Temple Commission, and they came out with their findings, and it was during the time of 1848 to 1867.
Yeah.
In fact, they had their work, and if you can just highlight about some of the major findings and what were the recommendations and suggestions, if any.
Because whether what are the commission's actual recommendation? The commission have only formed to document and public for documentation of these heritages, especially the rock cut caves and built heritage of the Harvard, Mysore region and Ahmedabad. And they have just because they know the beauty and importance of the documentation. Because India was growing, India have like a vast country, because every region have the multiple kind of heritages, especially the rock cut was very much attracting to these Europeans, and the built heritage of the Harvard region and Mysore region, because they are all the Hoysala temples and all located in this area. So they are trying to document and prepare the illustration and true copy, true eye copy, true these scale drawings. That was the contribution. They have given emphasis on the preparation of the drawings and photographs. That was the beauty of this commission. And the Ferguson have also contributed in at a lot, because he not only he studied or prepared the drawings, but he tried to analyze further. Because once the Ramraj has initiated or to decipher these Vastu Shastras, but he's not focusing on the this part, but he tried to understand and the importance of the documentation, because gradually architectural aspect of it, because he is an architect and he is having deep knowledge in deep sense of documentation. So he is focusing much more on the writing part and documentation part and descriptive part. What is visualizing if you are standing in the front of the cave, and what kind of visual impression is there. So that is more about, because these caves and temples were very dilapidated in condition. Because after that, our restoration part starts during the early 20th century.
Right.
So the focus of Ferguson and this Bombay Commission was more documentation, as well as they have tried to categorize these temples. The study carried out by the Ferguson and the Bombay Commission, they have categorized the temples of the Buddhist, Hindu and Jaina. So this kind of classification was first time came into practice, and he offered this kind of identification. And what is the beauty of that, and what is the lacking of that? Ferguson was very much influenced by the Western and Anglo-Saxon architecture, especially influenced from the Romans and all. So he was trying, he's not very much judicious while examining the Indian temples or Indian architecture. But whatever he has contributed, that is amazing, because he much focused on the documentation part as well.
That's great, and it's so very enriching, right? In fact, for the first time, our country has documented that the temples and the temple architecture we have region-wise and also the area-wise, what are the various characteristics, how it is that with the tradition of Buddhist, Jaina, and that of the foreign influences. So this is very interesting, and in fact we'll be again talking about that. So and in fact this is one of the most interesting chapter of that what we found out, in fact, in case of that of the Indian temple studies. We have come to know a lot on the temples and about the temple architecture and the studies which actually has shown us the path, about how in fact it was being carried, relating to that of the art and aesthetics of the temple architecture, and also the base of that of the temple foundation on the basis of our text, which is related to that of, which sir has actually explained about that related to Manasara, and who are the persons behind it.